recording, and Stephanie and Jessica, the floor is yours.
Jess, can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rocco. As Rocco said, I'm Jessica Jordan. I am the education librarian at Slippery Rock, and Dr. Pennucci is at Millersville. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start the presentation. And I just want to take one moment and introduce myself. So I've been at Slippery Rock for 8 years now. My background is in elementary education. I taught 2nd and 3rd grade before getting my master's in library science. I've worked in public libraries as system administrator for a county system, and I moved into library faculty at Clarion University in 2007, where I taught for 5 years. And during that 5 years, I spent a lot of time teaching both face-to-face and online before taking the position at Slippery Rock. So about me personally, I live in Brookville. My husband's a high school principal. My daughter's going into 10th grade, plays the violin. And so we keep pretty active in our house and talk a lot about education. So Steph, if you'd like to tell everybody a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, I met Jess at Clarion when we were there as in our grad program. I spent 13 years as a middle school, high school librarian in 2 different districts in Pennsylvania. And then gone into my 5th year at Millersville. So a little while ago, I transferred into higher ed. I've also, since 2009, worked as an adjunct instructor at different times for Clarion University, Arcadia University, and Millersville in library science and educational technology, both face-to-face and online and hybrid. So we've done this online teaching for a little while. So.
All right, so to jump in, the first thing I want to point out is pedagogy is really the art and science of the profession, and something that a lot of people, I think, kind of, I want to say mix up, is the fact that pedagogy and teaching are the same thing, and that is not the case. What happens is pedagogy is really what lies behind the teaching. So, for example, when I start to plan any type of lesson, whether it's something I'm using in a course or simply a BI, the first thing I do is start to work on objectives, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But those objectives that I'm forming are part of my pedagogy. How I implement those objectives, that's my teaching. So it's the implementation of strategies. And I did it too far. There we go. So for today, what I've done is kind of outlined 4 of what I have identified as personally best practices in pedagogy for online instruction. And Steph and I are just going to work through these together. If you have questions as we go, you're free to post them in the chat. Rocco has graciously volunteered to monitor the chat for us today. You can also save them for the end because we are going to allow time for question and answer. But the first thing I think that is most important when doing any type of preparation for teaching online is in communication. And one of the things I have found is that there is a definite need to have open communication, offer communication as much as possible in as many formats as possible, and to also put personal touch to it. So while you didn't need to know that I live in Brookville or that my husband's in education or my daughter plays the violin, those are the types of things I share with students to get them to open up with me. I want to learn as much about my students, and so I'm going to share because I want them to share. As an educator, whether again it's face-to-face or online, building relationships is one of the most important things you can do. You gain trust, you gain respect, and you need that to move forward through the content. So for me, communication is probably the top thing to do. I've never had anyone say, wow, you shared too much about yourself. It is a fine line. You know, I don't want to get wrapped up in the whole, hey, let's just learn about each other and forget the content. It is a balance, but I think just, you know, giving people small bits of who you are does help build those relationships, and especially in the online environment can really open up communication, you know, whether it's through online office hours or chat or any other feature.
Yeah, the communication piece is probably the most difficult one, and that's one that I see a lot where people have questions on how to do it, because you don't have that face-to-face contact with them where you can read body language and just get that quick question after class, or, you know, just those different ways that we interact. I mean, it's lost online. And when you haven't had these students before, or you only keep seeing them online, you don't have that same relationship as when you're face to face and you get to know them over time in the classroom. So that is key, the communication and figuring out how you want to encourage that. And I've seen mixed things with using video and stuff with students, because sometimes people say it's a privacy thing, and some people find it awkward, where for others it's the easiest way for them to communicate is just to record a quick video instead of doing the essay. And then you can also have, you do learn a little bit more about people when you see them in that format. But yeah, the communication piece is probably the most difficult online, regardless of what age group you're working with, whether it's kindergartners or, you know, doctoral students. But it is the key to making things gel and really having that cohesive class that can move not just the curriculum along, but learn from each other and get those conversations going that are tough. They're really tough to do online.
Yeah, and the other piece of that is our students, they have different levels of need in communication. So Steph and I both work with doctoral students, and I have doctoral students who I go into the class, I meet them, and I never hear from them for any reason until I see their dissertation coming through and they're graduating. Fantastic. Actually, just before the meeting, I got 3 texts from a doctoral student who is a billion questions and needs me more than anything in the world at the moment. And it's kind of funny because she texts me, we've talked via Zoom, she and I have communicated multiple ways. And so it all depends on the level of need from the student as well in terms of communication.
Mm.
The second thing is practical organization. So my best advice is anytime you're creating a video tutorial, an online class, whatever it may be, put yourself in your student's shoes. Again, various levels of technology skill. You're going to have students who will be able to click, click, click and get through everything. And you're gonna have other students who said, I'm sorry, where do I find the video? So you've got to be prepared for that. For this particular piece, practical organization, something I've started to do is in my online classes, it's called Start Here. And in my videos, I always start with a website. That way they always kind of know every time what to look for. So when a student logs into my class, if they need to know where to begin, they know to look for that Start Here button. And in my videos, I always start at the Bailey Library website, whether it's on the databases or I'm going to show them, you know, we're going to do a specific search in a specific database. We're going to use the catalog. Doesn't matter. I start at the Bailey Library website. That way, if they do watch multiple of my videos, they're getting that reinforcement of how it's laid out as well.
Yeah, the organization is key. I did most of my doctoral program was probably 95% online, and the way they had it set up was every course I logged into, it was all formatted the same. But it's rare that you see that. And if you can keep things consistent with the layout of your pages, that helps. Like when I teach online, my first section of each module is like, what's due, what are the readings, and what are the assignments and due dates and any other notes. So that first slide pops, or that first screen pops up, and they know what the expectation is for that week. It also helps me because then I don't miss something that they were supposed to read. It serves as a checklist for me too, to make sure everything's there. And if you have to have consistency with due dates, like if you can, you know, the standard, I know there's a love-hate relationship with discussion boards and the post by Thursday, 2 responses by Sunday, you know, at 11:59 p.m. But there is some truth to that if your assignments are consistently due on the same day, it's much easier for your students, because online classes, as a student or an instructor, it's easy to forget about them. But when you have a routine, it does help. But that consistency and layout, if all of your modules are set up the same if possible, or at least very similar, that's going to help your students too, because they know what to expect, they know what to look for. And it takes some of that anxiety away, especially for ones that aren't that tech savvy, where they're like, okay, I figured this piece out, and now they can concentrate on the content instead of, I don't know what to do, I don't know where it is, and that anxiety.
And my organization varies from my undergraduate classes to my graduate classes. So when I'm teaching undergraduate classes, I lay everything out weekly. For example, I'm teaching a class this fall to freshmen. So everything is going to be weekly. But with my graduate students, I tend to do modules, and I typically make them 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on the amount of content to be covered, based on a topic from the class, based on one of the objectives I've designed. And the reason for that is, a lot of our freshmen, and while we do have some non-traditional, majority of the freshmen are in that weekly pattern. They go to class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And so they're functioning like on a weekly basis, where a lot of grad students are doing this nights and weekends, and they need that flexibility. And so I find that the weekly is a little more structured and works better with the undergrad. And I use the modules with the grad students, and I've had positive feedback on both of those. So I think that works well too. So the third piece are the objectives. Writing objectives is challenging when you first begin. Once you get into the habit of writing objectives, it becomes much simpler. And the basic thing you want to remember when you're writing an objective is it measurable? Does it match what I'm planning on covering in terms of course content? And do I have an assessment to go with that objective? And that's going to kind of jump to number 4. So various levels of objectives. I've actually been working with a department, our technology for online learning at Slippery Rock. The director's name is Brian Danielson, and he's been helping me develop objectives at the module level, but also at the course level. So my course levels course level objectives, are very broad. Whereas when I get into each module, those objectives are specific and are tied directly to one of my assessments. Steph, your thoughts on objectives?
Yeah, once you get in the routine, but you do have to have that focus for the class, and it will lay out what you're going to cover and makes you think about why, what's important, what do we got to focus on. But they are key to any course, whether it's online or face-to-face. You do need those objectives, and then circling back and actually following through with them.
That is important, following through with them. And that's hard. And you may not succeed the first time. Even when I'm doing a BI, I typically have 3 objectives for my students, and it's based on, in collaboration with the classroom faculty member on what they're anticipating the students to get out of that particular session. And then I try to figure out whether it's a brief informal assessment in class where I ask a couple questions and kind of look for those clueless faces. Because let's be honest, when we're doing classes, we've got, 35, 40 students in front of us. We do see eyes glaze in BIs when they're face-to-face. But even when I do an online video, which obviously we're probably all going to be doing a lot more of here in the fall semester. I know I've already got 2 in the hopper that I've got to get created that I used to do face-to-face. I'm still using those same objectives. How I'm going to measure those objectives are going to be a little bit different because I can't do the classroom scan. And I can't, I can have discussion if it's, a live session, but if I'm doing a recording and sending it to the professor to implement in D2L or whatever online system, your university uses, it's going to look different. So you just have to be kind of thinking about how you're going to measure those objectives too. And again, the objectives tie right into number 4, the alignment of assessments. So when it comes to assessment, and this is where I have struggled in the past, I get hung up on assessing things that I'm teaching, but then I don't have an objective that lines to my assessment. And that was probably one of the toughest things for me to do in terms of pedagogy, was get all of that kind of in a functioning order. So don't expect that to happen instantaneously when you're prepping for again, really any type of instruction. You want to ensure when you're teaching online that the number of assessments you have are not greater than what you would do in a face-to-face class. When we made the transition at Slippery Rock to online instruction there in March, along with all other universities, one of the most consistent pieces of feedback we got from our students was when the classes went online, the professors added work because they thought we had more time. And that is not the mentality that we should take. Students, we have our 3-credit course or we have our BI and we have an hour for our BI, whatever, facet you're thinking about online teaching. You have your hour, you have your 3 credits, your 1 credit, what have you. It doesn't change just because students are meeting with you or watching a video online as opposed to sitting in that classroom with you. Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
That's true. It's people think because it's online, well, now we have to, because you can count class hours easily when you have to sit in a classroom for 3 hours a week or whatever it is. But online, it's like, well, I give them assignments. It could take them 20 minutes. It could take them 5 hours, but I need to justify. And then people do tend to overestimate that. You also need variety in your assignments. The discussion board every week is a good check-in. If you have reading assignments, you want to see if people are doing it. Of course, writing the questions for those that are in depth and not the first person, everybody going, I agree, I agree, I agree. That's a whole nother discussion is that. But some kind of variety of assessments. And also what I found that helps too is recording a quick podcast or something to explain it. Because sometimes I would do those weekly actually with introducing the new module, because it's the same as when you were in class. You can talk about the syllabus, you can talk about the assignment in 5 minutes versus typing up something that would be like 10 pages to say the same thing. So the quick 5-minute podcast recording could help eliminate some questions about the assignment. Doing check-ins with students if you have a long time between when you give the assignment and the due date because you aren't face-to-face, just those reminders that, hey, don't forget, because again, online it is easy to forget when you're not scheduled for a synchronous session. Scaffolding is helpful too to keep students on track, especially if you have younger ones. But I used to do that with my grad students too. With like APA format and stuff and trying to help them work through a research paper. But yeah, the number of assignments, people do tend to try to justify being online and saying, yeah, we're meeting the same class time and that doesn't have to happen. Just find a good balance with, are you able to assess that they learn the material? I mean, that's the whole point of the assignments. And my personal preference for this stuff is always as real world as possible with my assignments, because then I find that you get less pushback in general with, it's like, hey, this is how it's going to roll in the real world. You're writing a report. You're going to do one on how to plan an author visit. This is your budget. This is what you're going to do. So, they're covering the same kind of material that I wanted them to, but it's something that they can use in the field. That always helps too. And one thing you have to keep in mind too is group work. It can be useful to some people love it, but it also can be very difficult to do online. Just scheduling meetings. I remember when I was in my principal certification program at Cal, in some classes we had to do group assignments and just trying to schedule the meeting with 4 people who are working full time and coaching and whatever. It was difficult. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Don't get, you don't have to get rid of it, but just understand that they can't just meet at the library.
Those are all excellent points. And that's why I jumped to this next slide, because number 2, overuse of the same types of assessment. Great point about discussion boards. The other trap that we fall into is the use of quizzes, because they'll self-grade, and that's so easy. And that's really, I personally avoid using quizzes because I don't feel that I'm learning what the students are learning. Like, I'm not being able to gauge if they really understood. So the overuse of those same types of assessment, that's important. Also, using the same content or assignment semester after semester. I remember in a grad class, this was in 2019, actually last year, I took a quiz and all the questions were dated 2015. So those questions are 4 years old. 4 years doesn't seem like a long time, some of the content, I was like, yeah, this isn't accurate anymore. And I found myself grading the quiz I was taking as opposed to really focusing on what I was supposed to be doing, which was completing the quiz. So I personally avoid using the same content semester after semester. For example, every fall and every spring, I go over synthesis and APA formatting and how to construct an annotated bibliography with a specific class on campus. And I give them sample annotations to correct. I give them articles, and I try and mix that up every time. And I've added things and I've removed things that worked, things that didn't work. And that's going to look very differently because I always did that face-to-face, and I'm still doing that content online. So I don't want to recycle just what I did in the classroom and just put it online. I've got to think that through and make sure that I'm not just giving them something that number one, won't transition from face-to-face to online, for something that's dated and they've potentially already done. The big thing is too is the failure to engage. Like I said, the communication. It may seem over the top. I email my students every Monday morning. And to go back to what Steph said, all of my assignments are due Sundays at 11:59 p.m. That way, when the student gets up, Saturday morning and says, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything for that class, they still have, granted, they've given themselves a crunched window, and what they submit may not be quality, but at least it gives them a time to get that assignment done and get it submitted. And then I plan on Mondays, that's my grading time. Like Monday mornings, I try and or over lunch, whatever it may be, I plan time to look at that because I know that a bunch of things have come in overnight. And so it gives me the opportunity to know I have to do that. Plus, I start the Monday morning off with an email, letting the students remind of what's coming up, what module we're in, or what have you. But it's better to over-communicate than under-communicate, because that's other feedback I've seen students give. I never heard from my professor. I don't know they were there. And that's one of the worst things that can happen.
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, you can automate a lot of this stuff too. And I don't teach consistently. Like my adjunct work has been kind of one-off situations. So I haven't delved too deeply in it, but I've been in on some trainings. And like we use Desire to Learn at the state system. And I know there are automated features in there where you can give the students a quiz, and anybody that gets like a C or worse, you can send them a message saying, hey, why don't you set up an appointment to chat with me and we can go over your quiz? Or if they haven't engaged in the system, you can say, I noticed you haven't logged in yet. Is there anything I can do to help? So you can automate that stuff. You don't have to be sending out emails constantly. If you come up with one kind of message, you can set all that stuff up at the beginning of the semester and it dings out for you. And then the students really think you're like super on top. Oh my God, she's checking every 5 minutes. I'm like, no, not really. I just know how to use the program. And there's other features, other programs too, that a lot of our professors are starting to jump on, like Calendly to book appointments and stuff, things that can automate your schedule so that we use, what's the one that we're using with SpringShare? Their like appointments feature, like that's been awesome on the library side. LibCal. So that's been awesome, but a lot of our professors are using like Calendly or ones like that to automate their schedules. So it's not something that you have to be like, oh my God, this is going to take forever. Once you go through a couple semesters and you just add one piece, like I'm going to automate the quizzes, I'm going to automate the reminders about the modules. And then you just start integrating that, and it's going to take a lot of the work off your hands. And it keeps the students engaged because they're getting those reminders from your class, especially the ones that aren't paying attention. Because they're the ones that sometimes, I know, failure to grade in a timely fashion, been guilty of that. The grades were a little higher than they should have been on that assignment to make up for it. But
and that's one of the toughest. That's face-to-face or online. Like that, keeping on top of things and grading in a timely fashion, that is a tough one.
Yeah. And it's hard to hold them accountable for screwing up again when you didn't tell them the first time that they weren't doing things right, Very true. Very true. Live and learn, teach and learn.
That's where we're going to jump to personal insight. Your classes, your sessions, whatever it is you're doing in the online environment, if the first one is rough, it's okay. They're going to get better. They're going to improve over time. You're going to learn as you go. You're going to get advice. You're going to get feedback. It's inevitable. I think it's important to remember you learn as much as the students do. And I tell them that every semester. I say, yes, I'm the instructor of this course. And yes, this content is mine, and these are the things I want you to learn, but please know that I'm going to learn from you too. And when I tell them that, I think a lot of them kind of make it their goal to teach me something. And you can tell because a lot of students become more engaged and are a little more willing to share. And when you use their suggestions, they're not afraid to give them. I solicit feedback from my students all semester long. Yes, they do their student evals, and yes, that's what we use to evaluate ourselves in the state system. But I ask for that feedback consistently throughout because I want this experience to be as meaningful for them as I can possibly make it to be. So those are kind of my 3 points of personal insight. Steph, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, it's just, I mean, it's just like teaching face-to-face or teaching a one-off lesson. Every time I do it, I make notes. I'm like, this worked, this didn't work, because you don't know until you do it. You don't know how you can write what you think is the perfect assignment, and then you get it back and you're like, what is this? And when it's like 22 out of the 25, you're like, ooh, when it's 3, you're like, okay, they missed the ball. It wasn't me. But when it's like, you know, 80% of the class is like missed some part of it, or, you know, like, oh, I didn't explain that well. I mean, you're going to have assignments like that. You're going to have quizzes like that. You're going to have, you know, it's just part of teaching. It's, if you're not, just look at each one, go, okay, that didn't work. Cool. Let's figure it out and move on. That's all you can do. And then the thing too is if you're not used to teaching online, just do what you can and talk to your instructional designer. That's why they're there. They will hold your hand and walk you through. And if you need help, those people are your go-tos. I know the people at Millersville I mean, they're probably a little overwhelmed now, but usually they're like kind of like us in the library, like, please, we want to play. Come hang out with me. We can work together.
Right.
We can do some good things.
And you are 100% correct. So I remember when I went to meet with Brian Danielson and I sat in his office and I looked at him and I said, Brian, I took how many pedagogy classes? Like, shouldn't I already know this?
Mm-hmm.
Laughed and he said, just technology changes, lessons, everything's changing. He's like, why would you think you know everything? And he was absolutely right. And once I got over kind of it was my personal barrier of, oh, I should already know this. Oh my gosh, my classes have really improved greatly. And I am excited. I can actually say I'm excited to get my online kind of BIs ready for the fall semester using some of those tools and skills that Brian's given me. So reach out to people and don't be afraid to say you don't know something. I think that's important too.
Yeah. And even those things like the automated responses for quizzes or automated responses when a new module opens, like, who would know that? Who's going to sit there and dig around in the settings and go, I wonder if, no, those are the people that know those little tricks that can make your life so much easier.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Well, due to time, I'm going to go ahead and jump to our last slide. Thank you all for attending, and we would love to answer any questions or further explain anything. Our email addresses are there too, and you're free to take those down and follow up with us. But how about some questions? And I'll stop sharing so we can all see each other.
I have a question. What would you say you found would be the best strategy you've used in adapting a face-to-face class to an online format? Something I think we all can kind of relate to, especially last March.
But Rocco, it's funny you asked that because that's what I'm literally doing right now with my university seminar course. So it's digital citizenship, and I taught it face-to-face last year. Had an awesome experience with it, had some great in-class activities, group discussions, and I am now prepping to put that in the online. What's nice is I can still use a lot of my discussions. I can put those in a discussion board. What I'm doing is creating kind of a guide for how to complete discussion boards, though, to avoid exactly what Steph said. I agree. Yep, I was going to say what Shirley said. I want to make it meaningful, so it's going to take a little bit of work in that aspect. I'm going to be creating a lot of videos and going almost kind of a flipped approach, whereas I'm going to have them watch the videos, and then I am going to offer, and they're going to be optional, I have found that when you require students to log in at a certain time, even if it's their assigned class time, it's they don't appreciate it. Some do, and others do not. And in my experience, I've had more students complain about, you know, I didn't like being required to log in Monday at 10 a.m. That was a hassle. So I make them optional, and I do tell them they have to attend X number. It's usually 2 to 3. So I'm planning to do that with my university STEM students. They will have to attend 2 or 3 sessions, and I haven't set that magic number yet. But that's where we'll, you know, they will watch my video, and then we'll actually hold the discussion and talk about it and do it that way. So that's my example.
Yeah. I tend to use, I guess a lot of us do now, whatever the learning management system is, even when I'm teaching face-to-face. So it's kind of, and I haven't done any adjunct work in a while where I've had to flip it like that. I'm trying to think of ones where I taught both ways. I did some work at Arcadia where I was taught the same class, both online and hybrid. I really like the hybrid model when that's possible. I think you can really maximize time that way. But yeah, the videos, I agree. That's going to be, in fact, I got to make one later today for a summer session. It's and when we hang up, actually, I'll be doing it as an intro for a summer session class that's doing a research paper. So, but yeah, I'm going to be getting pretty skilled at doing videos real soon. I think we have a question here.
Yep, we have a question from chat from Teresa. Teresa asks, so I am creating an online module for asynchronous learning for an English 101 class. Do you have ideas for making it engaging?
See, this is the tricky part. The engaging part is tricky in asynchronous because you know, it's the recording you're going to share, and I think that's where it goes back to the personal touch. So what I'm actually creating something similar, but it's for an assessment class at Slippery Rock, and I'm actually going to have a phone conversation with the faculty member next week. And I've been thinking about the same thing, like how am I going to make this so that students are engaged? And it's going to have to be putting that personal touch in it, that they get to know me. I'm not going to get to know them because it's a recording that they're just going to, you know, watch at their leisure. So it is tough, but keep it as short as you can. That's important too. You know, just because you have a 45-minute, you know, BI session where they, you know, on a Tuesday where they come in for 50 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever, your online version doesn't have to be the same. So I think it's important. Use the time you need to get through the content. Don't feel you have to stretch it out to fit that class time. So depending on what you're covering, make it as short and sweet as you can, but yet put the personal side to it.
Yeah, and the videos where they can go back to it too is helpful, because that's one thing that that I'm going to be working on, because I tend to rush through stuff when I'm instructing, and you know, I like for them to be able to, because you only have that small window to do it. An online model, asynchronous learning. I would say any kind of tutorial videos that they can refer back to. If you have some kind of assignment, I don't know what the assignment is that they're working on, if it's a research paper or just essays or what they're working on. One of the things I tried, or I've been playing with, is breakout sessions, kind of like escape rooms, but the whole breakout EDU thing, that's something that I've been playing with my children's literature class, but that's kind of a different animal with the different databases and stuff that we use in that versus an English 101 class. What assignment do they have?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I'm thinking about my assessment class, and we always pull the assessment kits in the instructional material center. I have a ton of assessment kits, and I pull those and we physically go through them. And of course, now that's not going to be a thing. And so I'm deciding if, number one, when I create the video, I will talk about Dr. Papa, who's the instructor. So this video that I'm going to create is going to be specifically for her. It'll be like almost a one and done. I mean, if she wants to use it in other courses, she'll be able to, because it'll be, you know, it's going to have her name in it and it's going to talk about her particular content. Is that a waste of my time? I don't think so, because again, it's going back to that personal connection. So let's see, they're usually writing a short paper on a topic of their choice.
If there's some way that you can like co-teach maybe and have some kind of check-ins, like, I hate to say a discussion board, but like a water cooler type thing where they can post questions, and because sometimes those questions that people would have asked in class, like 5 other people have the same question, but they don't come back to it, or they don't ask, you know, they're waiting on somebody else to ask it. So sometimes that can help. And if it's something that you can follow through with them during the semester. I haven't had much luck with that, with putting up the Ask a Librarian discussion boards. But I've tried it. But they could also contact directly.
Too. This ties in with that stuff. Nick said, you know, making sure it's important to design content to funnel them back. And if you don't understand this, email me, call me, message me. I end every video I make with my contact information, my email. And I always tell students, if you remember nothing else from this video, remember jessica.jordan@sru.edu. Like, I don't care if you email me and say, hey, I'm in Dr. Pap's class and I watched some video and I have no clue of the content.
Yeah.
I will tell you what it was. We'll walk through it. So I think that's important too.
Yeah. Yeah, them getting to know you is the big thing.
Yeah.
Because you want those follow-up appointments. And that could be something too, if you're willing to offer that, is, I know we started using LiveCal at Millersville, and it seems to be working pretty well, where it syncs up with my Outlook, and I have students who schedule appointments for me. They just pop up on my calendar. But when you know ahead of time what the assignment is, and if you offer that one-to-one, you're going to have a couple people bite on it. And then word gets out too. I've had that as well, where like, oh, you helped a friend of mine or something like that. So, but offering that one-to-one time, which could be overwhelming depending on how many students there are, but that's also sometimes a good problem to have.
And I know we're running low on time, but I do want to share this one funny story. So I create many videos for many faculty, and I created a video for a graduate class in counseling and development. And I did my whole, I'm, you know, Jessica Jordan, here's my picture, you know. So on the weekends, I actually waitress, and I've done this for 23 years, and I know I need to quit, but I love it. So about probably a year ago, I'm at the restaurant, and I hear this lady, and I hear, Mom, I'm telling you, that's her. And I turn, and this girl goes, aren't you my librarian? She goes, I saw you in a video. And I laughed, and I said, depends where you go to school. And she said, I'm at Slippery Rock, I'm in counseling and development. You made a video, you're Jessica Jordan. And I was like, whoa. And she told me, she's like, I recognized your face and I've wanted to meet you, and here you are. So it was one of those serendipitous moments you think will never happen. And I thought, oh my gosh, number one, somebody watched my video. Yay, because you wonder that too. When you create all these things, you spend hours. Did anybody really watch it? So it was kind of this win-win situation. And that's, again, why I'm really big on the communication and the personal touch. I don't think you can go wrong, because that student has since emailed me. I can now put a face to that name, and it's been awesome. So just remember, put the time in, and know that people are watching it too when you're making videos or anything of that nature.
Yeah. And again, if you're overwhelmed, call your IT, call your instructional designer. We tell people to ask us for help. We can ask for help too.
Thank you all for attending.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And thank you, Rocco, for serving as our moderator.
Sure. Thank you both so much. That was outstanding. There was so much great information in there. I'm even going to use it for my online classes I have to teach. I will direct everyone to the chat. We have a link to a feedback form if you want to provide feedback to help us make the video series better. And also, there is a link to our YouTube playlist. Now, this video will not be up on that playlist. Probably there's a little 2-week embargo. But if you wanted to watch other videos in our series, then the YouTube playlist is free, open. Share it with your friends. Share it with your colleagues who wanted to attend but couldn't. Whatever. And again, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you so much to our awesome presenters. There's no fake applause here on Zoom, but I'm applauding mentally. Thank you both so much for your insight, because this was great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
I will stop the recording now.